Malaya 3. And in addition, we have University Malaya 1. On the motion, this House will allow businesses to regulate themselves. I'd like to invite the Prime Minister, Sharon, to start off the debate.
Can I have a time? Testing. Here. On the motion that this House would allow businesses to regulate themselves, we strongly propose this motion for the simple logic behind it, that we believe that businesses such as hypermarkets in Malaysia, Giant, Jasco and Tesco should be given the autonomy, the control to regulate their own business in the way they want it to go. Now, before moving on, let me clarify certain things and let me set this debate in our context. Okay, first and foremost, we define businesses as I've mentioned earlier. Second, we define products as everything sold in the store. Thirdly, we define, before that, this it will be set in Malaysia, okay? Now, in status quo, allow me to tell you the process in status quo. For example, chicken, okay? So, it's divided into 3 levels: producer, middleman, or will be called the agent, and thirdly, hypermarkets, the stores themselves. First and foremost, a producer. They will catch the chicken and they will cut them up, process the chicken, and put them for packaging. Now, this middleman or this agent will come and purchase this chicken meat in bulks, which will be cheaper for them. Thirdly, the hypermarket will deal with the middleman, the agent, and purchase items from them. Now, we see that there is an indirect relationship between the manufacturer and the store, and we strongly oppose this. We say that businesses such as these hypermarkets should directly deal with the manufacturers. Now, for the simple logic behind it, we say that prices, no sir, no thank you. We believe that prices will increase due to the amount used during this relationship cycle with the existence of this middleman. Now, what are these expenditure, right? We tell you that this expenditure includes transportation fee and commission fee paid to the agent. We say that this agent is not necessary and does not need to be in this context whereby the manufacturer and the hypermarket should just deal directly. Now, before going to my points, any POI?
Shouldn't this debate be regulation between different businesses and different hypermarkets, not within businesses itself?
Well, that is the context we've set in, and we say that it is the relationship between the manufacturer, the middleman, and the business itself as a whole. Now, we think that because the middleman exists in status quo, we say that this middleman is not necessary because it takes the commission from the hypermarket and it causes the price of the end product to increase. We say that this is not the way to go, and companies and consumers both equally benefit from this. Yes, Deborah?
Even removing or forcing the removal of middleman already a form of regulation.
We would say that by removing this middleman from the context of this relationship, we say that the middleman can do other forms of job, that he is not necessary for this dealing. We say that the hypermarkets can directly negotiate and buy from the purchasers themselves. Now, for example, an item sold from the manufacturer for 1 ringgit. The middleman buys it for 1 ringgit and 20 cents. Hypermarket buys it for 1 ringgit and 50 cents. We say that this increase in price is unnecessary for the end product. We say that this amount of expenditure for multiple items can be used for other things, such as for that hypermarket to purchase their own transportation and their own van for the purpose of control and for the purpose of regulation in internal affairs. We say that this middleman is not necessary, and that's our stance for today, simply because it affects the end product's price. Now, first and foremost, my first point will be about the right of that entity, that store, to regulate. Second would be the benefits to the consumers. My second speaker will talk about the benefits to the company themselves, and Dylan will rebut all the points coming out from their side. Now, this commission used, first, the right of companies to self-regulate. These companies are private entities, private companies, and we say the government has certain limit to control or regulate the way the things run within that company. We said that the government only controls the highest price and the lowest price in status quo in the country as a whole. But within that range, we say that the company has the right to regulate their own price, and if they would not want the middleman to be part of their dealing, we say that that is fine and we are okay with it. No, Sarah, no, thank you. Now, moving on to my second, so that is how we're going to run this debate, in a sense where we believe the middleman is not necessary. Things can directly be negotiated from the manufacturers because it affects the end price, and we say we want the end price to be at the lowest it can possibly be, and the expenditure can be used for other things such as transportation. No, thank you. Now, second point, benefits to the consumers, right? We believe that if the end product increases, it really causes detriment. It's detrimental to the on the part of the consumers. We say that the consumers can purchase it at a lower price, and we say that that can happen without the existence of this middleman. We say that the consumer's utility will increase as they will be able to purchase more items at the cheaper price, and etc. We believe that the company itself does also benefit from this because they can carry on other marketing strategies with the expenditure that they need not use to pay for the middleman, such as his commission and the transportation to transport all these products to their hypermarket. We say that the company and the consumers both benefit hand in hand from this dealing. Now, to the middleman, to the agent, by the hypermarket varies depending on certain factors. First and foremost, depending on the relationship and connection with the hypermarket, which is different and differs from every individual. Second point is that the duration of the delay and the experience by the middleman with the hypermarket, this relationship varies, and the commission is paid varying on that. Now, we said if a person has known that company for a certain period of time, the prices will probably ask for a cheaper commission because they know the company. But other people without experience and without the connection, they will ask for an increasing price in their commission. So we say there's an irregularity here, and we believe that this element has to go. Now, what have I told you, Mr. Speaker? I have told you that the government has limited rights for the company to regulate, and the company has the ultimate choice and control to regulate their own businesses within the range set by the government, which they're not infringing on any rights set by the government or any governmental policy. Second, it is beneficial to the consumers because the end product will be cheaper without the existence of the middleman. Now, what do we stand for? Our stance is simple, Mr. Speaker. We do not want the middleman or the agent to have a big role in this negotiation or in this dealing. We strongly say that the hypermarket and both consumers can benefit hand in hand from this, and we say that this is therefore vote government. Thank you.
Thank the Prime Minister for speech. Now I'd like to invite the Leader of Opposition, Deborah, to start the case on side.
This debate is not about whether middlemen are good or bad. This debate is about your companies and businesses should be able to decide whether they want to use middlemen or not. This is where I have several responses, very salient in response to that case. Firstly, let's point out the concessions that have already made. We asked in our POI that if you're forcing the state to come in and remove the influences of middlemen, that is already a form of regulation, of imposition on behalf of the state onto the businesses. Concession number one. But concession number two, Sharon said in her speech that you still allow the government to come in and regulate, for example, things like your maximum price, things like minimum wage, and other things like that. We think that is already also a concession that you want to talk about. But let's talk about let's assume that their case setup is merely about middlemen or merely about the hypermarkets, right? Even if we engage on that context, we say that even in cases where we think, even if you look at petty agriculture sector, where the influence of the middleman is very huge and it does come in to exploit the people, this is where our proposal comes in, right? We say that the state should come in and regulate those influences if the outcome is that it harms the consumers. I have two arguments for you today, and my other rebuttals will be integrated. Firstly, I'll talk to you about the characterization of companies. Two levels. Firstly, we have to know why companies without any regulation from the government will always spiral down into the road of exploiting or profit-oriented road that harms the consumer. On the first level, we tell you they are profit-oriented. That means that they will always aspire or try to achieve minimum cost of production as low as possible at whatever measure that it means for them to take. Secondly, they always seek to maximize their profit, which means at any level, if they have the capability to monopoly the market, they will try to exploit consumers by setting high prices. Second level, we think companies are only accountable to your shareholders, right? So if you're talking about hypermarkets like Tesco, like Giant, they're only accountable to the shareholders within the company and not to the public. This means that every year you only have to show there's a certain amount of revenue and make your shareholders happy, and they do get the profit and revenue from their stocks and shares. They are happy. They are not accountable to the public, because the public will never have a say or have a power to influence change within your company management. Yes?
Okay, our policy is to get the middleman to get it at the lowest price possible. Isn't that the company could profit more, and that's where they can respond to shareholders?
Okay, if you are saying that government should come in and force the removal, that is already a form of regulation. But if your case is that companies by themselves should remove middlemen, then that is not a contention, because we are standing for that state only step in when there is a harm. If your removal of middlemen provides a benefit and that you provide the lowest price possible for the consumers, then we don't have an issue. But secondly, right, let's go to my second part of the argument. Why are these characterization of companies necessarily bad, and what are the harms that it brings to the consumers? Three levels. Firstly, on product safety. When you compromise safety checks, when you try to achieve as minimal cost as possible in your production, you tend to use cheap but dangerous ingredients. We point to you examples such as melanin in milk in China, where you poison children and kids, and it caused a huge amount of social cost onto the government. We point to you mercury in cosmetics, for example, things that can substantially harm the users and consumers. We think now the role of the state is to prevent these things from even happening in the first place, right? If we are talking about suits, like if we are going to say if people can still sue companies if they start buying defective goods and products from Tesco or hypermarket, if you are going to say they can still sue them, we think that is not enough, because you have to prevent it from happening in the first place and prevent the consumers from absorbing those harms, right? But on the second level, we think exploitation always happens without regulation. We point to you examples in the banking sector where, for example, you look at the subprime mortgages where banks prey on borrowers that cannot pay back. When inter-trading of mortgages and your debt obligations between the banks eventually fuel the bubble, and then it burst and it left people in debts. This is where we think the problem is. No, thank you. Because about more than 10 years ago, there was a law called the Glass-Steagall Act that came in to prevent these things from happening. But that act was soon removed, and that is where it allowed for all these problems to happen. It allowed for banks to have proprietary trading that harms consumers, that put consumers into debts. But the third level, why is it bad for consumers? We think competition is harmed, right? If you engage on their context, on hypermarkets, on Tesco and Giant, right? We think that these hypermarkets that already dominate the local market come together. It is very easy for them to have a monopoly, right? No, thank you. We think it is easy when once companies have the scale and have the financial ability to intentionally lower their price for a certain period in order to suffocate new businesses or new competitions. That means new hypermarkets or new businesses that try to enter into the market will never make it into the market because they just cannot compete with the price. If that is not enough, we think monopoly can happen, oligopoly can also happen where several of these companies come and work together. We think that's bad for consumers because now you have less choice because the market is dominated. It is also bad for the industry because you discourage innovation, right? Now big companies are complacent and new companies are discouraged to enter. We'll point to you the case where monopoly happens in the field of electronics by Samsung and iPhone. We think that kind of monopoly is bad. But lastly, why is the government best to stand in and regulate those problems? We think the government in the role of in the context of today's debate is this, that you regulate the conflict of interest between companies and consumers because these two will never get along by themselves. Firstly, why is the government best? We think it is neutral. We think it has no specific tie to either the company nor the consumer. Therefore, it is most suitable for that role. But secondly, the government is elected by the people. Therefore, they are accountable, right? That when people are unhappy with your government, they can vote you out the next level. We think it also has the ability to apply and impose your laws, and that is where we think regulation is of utmost necessary to protect consumers. For all those reasons, we're very proud to oppose.
I thank the leader of opposition for speaking on the case of side government. I'd like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this debate is about hypermarkets and hypermarkets only. We're not talking about banks. We're not talking about these other entities, for example, safety checks and quality checks. We think that those are not debate. We think that Deborah missed the boat. First, before I move on to my points, right, we're going to talk to you about the harms of middlemen and how they harm consumers, and also the hypermarket itself. I'm going to go into my rebuttals. Deborah wanted to talk to you about three things. First of all, on the characterization of companies and how by regulating themselves it will cause them failure. Second of all, she wanted to talk to you about the harms to consumers. Third of all, she wanted to talk about why government is the best regulator. We tell you that no, companies themselves should be given the right to regulate themselves. Why? Because they are a private business. We tell you that as long as they go through, as long as they conform to the price ranges that government sets for them and other laws that are not relevant to this middleman issue, right? We tell you that's fine. We tell you that they have every single right to regulate themselves. Let's look at her second point. When she wanted to talk to you about characterizations of company, because they say that somehow without government control they will fail, because somehow when there's no government control in businesses, now somehow these companies will only want to be accountable to their shareholders and not to the public. It's as if they're not. It's as if they don't know how a business works. Because when you are a business, of course you want profit, and when you want profit, you always want to impress your consumers. In order to impress your shareholder, right? We tell you that you have to gain profit, and in order to gain profit, you always want to impress your consumers, and you want to attract more consumers. This is why consumers are actually a party to this issue. We tell you that that hypermarkets will be accountable to consumers. We tell you consumers are a very important party in this place, and they conceded that when Deborah's point, when her second point were the harms to consumers. Let's go to her second point. Okay, yes.
Under your, are you proposing that the government should intervene and force the middleman out in any hypermarket chain of production?
No, we tell you that the company, these hypermarkets are the one that should not and should remove all ties with middlemen. We tell you that they should remove all these middlemen from their businesses. We tell you that they should contact directly with the supplier. Okay, let's her second point. When she wanted to talk to you about the harms to consumer, first harm, when she wanted to talk to you about safety checks, I tell you that safety checks is not the issue. Why? Because safety checks is on the manufacturer side. We tell you that if you're concerned about safety checks, you have to go to the manufacturer and see if your manufacturer is the one that's giving you quality items. We tell you that if you want to sue, for example, if you have a problem with their product, you go and sue the manufacturer. Second harm, right? When she wanted to talk to you about exploitation, Mr. Speaker, this is not about exploitation. Banks are not a party to this debate. Third harm, when she wanted to talk to you about competition being harmed, we tell you that even in status quo, hypermarkets already exist. So the monopoly that you are talking already exists in status quo. And even if middlemen were there, we tell you that now hypermarkets have to increase their prices, and this is even more harmful for your new businesses and things like that. We tell you it's more harmful on that side. Before I move on to my points, yes, last one.
If you agree that businesses should self-regulate, why did the Prime Minister agree that you should set price limits?
We tell you that that's a law, right? We tell you that these hypermarkets cannot go and fix their own prices. We concede to that. But however, we tell you in order to be in that kind of range of prices, we tell you that middlemen are stopping them from getting the most profit that they can. This goes nicely to my point where I'm going to talk to you about the harms of these middlemen. 4 levels, 4 harms that these middlemen bring to these hypermarkets. First of all, price fixing. What is price fixing, right? We tell you that when there is only one supplier of one product, that person can actually set the price at whatever price that he wants. This middleman, this only single middleman that supplies this product. Now what happens, right? We tell you that this is bad. Now he can set whatever price that he wants, and this is detrimental to the hypermarkets because now they have to increase their prices according to gain profit and when they sell to consumers. We tell you now that there will be colluding and also price fixing among these middlemen. Why? For example, when there are more than one middleman. What happens when there are more than one middleman? Right? Let's look at an example. When you want to sell Coke, and there are 3 middlemen that want to supply you Coke. This is something that happens right in status quo. They collude. They make a pact among themselves and say, okay, we don't want to compete among themselves. What if middleman A, okay, you take the deal. You sell them the lowest price that we can afford. And then what happens when they get the deal, right? That profit that they get from the hypermarkets, they divide it among the other middlemen who did not get the deal. We tell you this is harmful because now the single middleman that got the deal was a very high price to the hypermarket. We tell you that's harmful because now the hypermarkets, in the end of the day, still have to increase their price, and this is detrimental to the consumers, which your side is not protecting. Second harm, right, where there's a control of supply. Why? Because when there's no competition, right? Since the middlemen are the ones supplying these products to the hypermarket, we tell you that they get to control the supply as well. This is harmful, especially in certain seasons. For example, in Malaysia, when you look at Hari Raya, or when you look at Chinese New Year's, for example, when sugar is actually an essential to consumers. We tell you that now these middlemen have the power to control the supply that goes to the hypermarket. And what happens when they give low supply, right? This causes the hypermarket to actually have a problem in setting the price that they want to. And even if they cannot even if they cannot put a higher price, they actually have to sell limited quantities to the consumers, for example, right? For example, we can only sell 2 packets of sugar to one customer. I'm sorry, I already took 2. Now let's look at the third harm, right? Bad rigging. We tell you that middlemen, when they collude among themselves, what happens is now you allow now you allow high prices and limited supply to happen because of this bad rigging, because they want to take turns in taking profit. For example, 1 month supplier A gets the deal, second month supplier B gets the deal. We tell you that this is called bad rigging. Now let's look at the 4th and final harm. Well, now there's a market division, right? Because we tell you, for example, chicken. In status quo, there are a lot of suppliers of chicken, right? For example, if I'm a supplier and my Prime Minister is a supplier, she will supply only to Johor Bahru, for example. I will supply only to KL. We tell you this allows the supplier to gain more control over these hypermarkets because now they are the ones controlling the price. They are the ones controlling the supply to the hypermarkets. In the end of the day, what happens is, when we remove the middleman, when we want these hypermarkets to remove these middlemen, we tell you that remove all these harms that happen, that are caused by these middlemen, and in the end of the day, we can get a lower price for consumers. These hypermarkets will get more profit, and this profit can be channeled into more avenues. With that, we win.
Thank the Prime Minister for his speech. Continues beside the government, like why the deputy of opposition, where you get.
Mr. Speaker, they said that the middleman is so bad, but then they are not afraid to bite the bullet to say that the government should step in and remove the middleman altogether. They say that businesses should, by their own good heart and their own goodwill, somehow through religious belief or whatsoever, remove the middleman whatsoever. There's no proposal coming from their side. They're saying that businesses should do it. So we don't think there's any proposal from side government. I don't even know what we are supposed to debate today. Let's look at the motion today. The motion says that this House will allow businesses to regulate themselves. So there must be a concession on both sides that in status quo, there is some forms of regulation, and on government side, businesses should now, the government should remove this kind of regulation. But the fact is, the government today, or any state, does not force hypermarkets to have any middleman whatsoever. So I don't understand what kind of self-regulation that you want on the side of business at the end of the day. We need a proposal from their side, because if they say that the state must force a price range, that the state must force a minimum wage, how can your proposal go through if the state does not come in and say you must force the middleman out? How can you only rely on the goodwill of companies themselves? We think it's a cowardly government on their side, and that's why this debate has degenerated to what it is today. But if you say that, let's look at the best case scenario. Let's engage on their middleman argument at its best. They said that firstly, you have only one middleman and there are no other sources, hence the prices that they offer will always be expensive. No, we say that hypermarkets have the capability and resources to find many other sources of middlemen. There is also competition among middlemen. You can obtain the middleman that offers the cheapest price. Furthermore, hypermarkets buy products in bulk. So necessarily, they're always able to, at a cheaper price, hence they're always able to cover the costs of middlemen. Sometimes hypermarkets do not want to go themselves to the farm and to the producers to take all the vegetables and the chickens, because simply it's too expensive to do so. It's too expensive to employ another truck, another lorry, another 10 more staffs to go to the Cameron Highlands farms to pluck that kind of vegetation. In fact, if you go through the middleman, it's probably be cheaper for the hypermarkets per se. Hence, they should always employ this. The reason why hypermarkets choose the middleman is not because they are forced to do so, because it's the cheapest way. The fact that all hypermarkets are adopting the same strategy shows that this is the financial path and the financial strategy that's most sustainable to hypermarkets. Because hypermarkets also face competition. Giant and Tesco will always face competition to offer the lower prices. So if they are going through an expensive middleman and their prices of their products are so high and people don't buy, why are they still choosing the middleman path? Why are they still maintaining status quo? Surely there must be a reason. Surely choosing the middleman is the cheaper option here today, simply because they do not have the resources and the technical expertise to extract products or to connect with the farmers out there. They will rather rely on middlemen. We think there's nothing wrong in businesses where you always have intermediary companies and people that connect to you, that provide specialized expertise to you. That's the reality of the world economy today, that each business is becoming more specialized. You cannot do everything by yourself. You cannot be producing eggs in the farm, plucking the eggs, and to sell it through to your customers. There is an amount of specialization. That is where the middleman comes in, and that's where prices are cheaper necessarily. So yes, Dylan, save yourself.
Speaker, does company know when middlemen could? That's a very simple thing.
That's where regulation comes in. That's where the state needs to come in to promote that anti-competition regulation. That's where regulation needs to come into play. If you're not happy with that, companies always have the Competition Act. Mr. Speaker, the Competition Act just passed in 2010. It's in place. I know this because I'm a law student. It prevents companies and it prevents middlemen from conspiring and fixing a certain price just because so that it's better for consumers nowadays. It punishes this middleman, and it punishes companies if they set a price and if they collude. And this is where the benefits of the consumer comes in. That is why we are principally consistent. We have always been saying that as long as it harms consumers, the state can always come in. And if you're so scared, the only thing you're scared is that middlemen are colluding with themselves behind their backs, then the state should regulate, and you're principally consistent with our proposal in that. Because the thing is this, if you principally allow companies to regulate themselves, you should allow them to do whatever they want. Whether they choose to have 3 more middlemen or to have no middlemen, that is companies by themselves. That is the principle of self-regulation. You shouldn't tell them and you shouldn't dictate that you should have no middlemen, you should not sell eggs in your supermarket, you shouldn't sell beef in your hypermarket. That is a form of control. So if you really are consistent with self-regulation, then whatever financial strategy or organizational strategy that the company adopts, then you should allow it and support it. And we think that the market regulates itself in this matter. Mr. Speaker, I have only one thing to talk to you about in this sense. I'm talking about negative externalities, because they've never engaged in our case, where the real debate today is about how companies should not allow to regulate themselves, how state should come in to regulate them. Because we are talking about environmental degradation. Because factories and companies, even at hypermarkets, necessarily produce huge amount of waste that is thrown into rivers, like pig carcasses in the Yangtze River. How pollution is happening among businesses now. They are raising an unhealthy air index in Philippines and Beijing. Why is it detrimental to the public? Why? Because firstly, it harms the public, the people where the government is supposed to have a social contract to protect. All this environmental pollution and hardship is causing people to suffer. But it's also detrimental to businesses because it dries out investors. Whenever Beijing is offered an inconducive environment for people to come in because of the irreversibility of environmental pollution, we think that the government needs to spend billions of dollars to clean it up. When it can use those money instead to be used on welfare or to reduce tariffs so that businesses are able to enter the country. We think that in the long term, environmental degradation happens because these businesses allow themselves to self-regulate. And the state needs to come in and say that we have environmental laws that we need to adhere to, that we need to protect. We need to protect the public, we need to protect businesses at the end of the day. This is where government regulation needs to come in and step in. That's why we do not want businesses to self-regulate. Even on the idea of minimum wage, Mr. Speaker, we think that the government needs to step in to provide a minimum amount of wage so that we are able to break through the middle income gap that we're having today. And this is very prevalent among low-skilled workers who simply need the higher wages to sustain their family members and their livelihood at the end of the day. There are many reasons why companies should be regulated. There's no proposal on their side. We think they are proposing status quo. Instead, we think they should come in and propose the real debate. For all those reasons, we are proud to oppose.
Yellow for speech. Please, beside government, like to invite the next speaker,
Mr. Speaker, members of this House, I have 3 main issues to talk about. Number 1, what is the benefit to the hypermarket and the consumer itself? Number 2, how does middleman leads to the increase of price of their end products? Number 3, the regulation part that they want to talk about. Mr. Speaker, if I go to a hypermarket and I bought a pack of chicken breast, it cost me 15 ringgit in Just Go. If I go to Giant, I buy the same product, it cost me 13 ringgit. If I go to Eon, I can buy some chicken breasts as the same product at 6 ringgit. Why? Because there are a variety of the various of price set by the middleman itself. They set a different set of commission that based on their connection with the hypermarket that the hypermarket need to pay to them. And this is what leads to the price of the product being so expensive. Even all the consumers in this house doesn't aware of it. So before that, I'm going to make 3 rebuttals. Firstly, about the banking sector is out of the context. We've said it, only hypermarket. It's out of the context. We're going to deal with that. Number 2, they talk about businesses. Okay, if you really want to talk about business, the middleman, we don't care whether it's the government or the business itself going to get rid of the middleman. The point is we're going to get rid of the middleman, and that's our point. So if in case that you disagree with business intervening in removing middleman itself, the point is this. If businessmen really cannot get rid of the middleman, then that's where the government interferes. That's always happened. When there's a problem, that's where government intervene at the end of the day. Number 3, that want to talk about negative externalities about environmental degradations. We're setting this debate about middlemen getting a cheapest product for the consumer itself. We're going to talk about degradations of environment and stuff like that. Let's set it in another debate. Sit down. Before that, let me move on to my first issues. What is the benefit, the hypermarket and the consumer itself? Their main contention is this: how it's going to maximize profit. I think we have dealt with that problem at the first place. We say that we're going to get rid of the middleman, we're going to get the cheapest product, the product at the cheapest price possible. I think it goes against their principle as well. They want a cheaper product where the company can maximize their profit. I think we've proven that in our point. Secondly, they contended that are better accountable to the shareholder. We say that a cheaper product means that at the end of the day, the shareholder itself would be more than, cloud nine, happy if they can profit more. Sit down. They talk about exploitation, number 3. We say that most of the time, consumer itself doesn't even know that the middleman is the main factor why the price of the end product is so high. Because all they know is they go to the hypermarket and buy the products. More than that, let's go to the extreme, to the hypermarket itself. I asked my POI, does the hypermarket knows when does a middleman collude outside of the market? All they would know is they regulate the price of the product, how many supply they're going to get, when the product is going to end, then they're going to order more product. That's all they know. You have to prove to us if you really say that middleman is really so competitive. And second speaker talk about on 4 levels how they fix price, they limit the supply of the market, more than that, bid rigging. I'm going to explain more in my issues. Okay, before that, yes.
If there's no middleman and the prices are low and the shareholders are happy, why aren't all the hypermarkets doing it already?
Okay, there isn't one example, but just go Aeon and Giant. They're dealing directly with Nestle to get Milo and stuff like that. They're not getting those products through middlemen anymore. So what our policy does is this: to other type of product like chicken and if possible beef, let's do it. If you're more than happy than that. Okay, let's go on to my. So our contention is this: mainly we can get the cheapest product because we don't want to go through the 3 processes. We just want to go through the 2 processes, like hypermarket, get the product straight away from the manufacturer, get rid of the middleman. That's where the commission, we don't need to have to pay commission, because the commission that the hypermarket paid to the middleman itself is the add-on factor to the price of the product. So this is what leads to the higher price of the end product itself. Mr. Speaker, my second issue: how does middleman lead to the price of the product? So my question is this to their side of the house: what is the benefit that the middleman can bring to the house other than increasing price of product, because they receive commission? They never proven to us what's the benefit they're going to bring. So our contention have 4 levels. Number 2, price fixing. We're talking about middleman itself doesn't want to compete in the market. They get the product from the manufacturing like Nestle, and then they're going to talk with each other. Let's fix a price so that we can profit more. More than that, the moment they don't compete against each other, i.e. middleman A, middleman B, and C. Middleman A say that I want to set this price at this time I'm going to profit more, 1 ringgit and 50 cents for Coca-Cola. Middleman B that say that I want to sell this product at 2 ringgit. Middleman C, 2 ringgit and 50 cents. Of course, middleman A gonna sell. Hypermarket gonna buy that product from middleman A. So at the end of the day, middleman A profit from get the profit. They're just gonna share that profit with the other middleman. This is what restrict competition where we don't want that. Sit down. More than that, secondly, we talk about the supply, control of supply, where middlemen itself, during season, they're going to limit the supply of sugar in the market. That leads to the increase of price of sugar, in Hari Raya, the Malays know well. Thirdly, bid rigging. We talk about how it's the same concept where middlemen colluding. They don't want to compete and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, you just have someone in the middle controlling the price, because now you're letting the middleman to control the price instead of hypermarket going to the manufacturing like Nestle to get the product, because manufacturing never set product. What they want, like Nestle, they just want to get rid of their productions of product like Milo and stuff like that. So their starting price might be 1 ringgit, but if you give it to middleman, it might be 1 ringgit and 30 cents, and get to the hypermarket, the price would be 1 ringgit and 50 cents. So if you get rid of the middleman, what it does is this. So if the starting price is 1 ringgit, if the hypermarket get the product straight away from the manufacturer, okay, at 1 ringgit, then they're going to sell the product at 1 ringgit and 30 cents. That's what leads to the reducing of cost price of the end product itself. So more than that, the third issue is regulation. We see that most of regulation, if you see it's really working, why there are still middlemen out there fixing price, limiting supply of the product in the market, and why are all these problems still exist in the status quo? Second response to that, they're all rich. They can find loopholes in the law and just deal with it in the court. So which policy best protects the best interests of you and me and also the hypermarket? Mr. Speaker, sir, okay, I'll talk about what's the benefit of the hypermarket and the consumer, what's the best interest for you and me and hypermarket and the shareholder. Secondly, how middleman leads to increase of price. For all those reasons, we should go to final.
Now that we find opposition bid Sarah to
Let's use the example that Dylan gave. If Eon gives out chicken for $6 and Giant gives out chicken for $12, then naturally there would be incentive for customers to source out the cheaper option for themselves. But even in the case where that doesn't happen, we tell you already that state comes in to regulate that form of price hike in terms of subsidies, even in terms of price ceilings to ensure that customers and consumers get the best possible option for themselves. Mr. Speaker, you need to realize that all the regulation that they've talked about is a form of state regulation at its best. But even if that wasn't the case, they already conceded in cases where middlemen have this kind of conspiracy theory that Atira talked about and they collaborate with each other. That's already concession that you need a supranatural body, that you need someone higher in authority to regulate your prices in order to get the best option, in order to get that buck for your dollar idea. I have 3 issues for today. Number 1, no thank you. I'll tell you how the first issue, right, is the removal of middlemen, a form of state or company regulation. Number 2, I'll tell you whether companies are capable of self-regulation or not. And last but not least, I'll draw to you what's best for the consumer. Let's look at the first issue, because that's the main contention coming from their side, is the removal of middlemen, a form of state or company regulation. The government claims that companies, hypermarts such as Tesco and Giant, should avoid middlemen because of the high cost that it incurs on the end product. But we tell you already that the nature of hypermarts is this, that they avoid the middleman at all costs. The nature of the hypermart is they keep the minimum price as much as possible because they need to stay competitive with their fellow hypermarts such as Giant, such as Carrefour, for example. We tell you that they already deal with agricultural producers directly to ensure low prices. So whatever they talk to you about how the middlemen are now controlling the hypermarts doesn't exist, because hypermarkets have that form of capital, have that form of human resource to source out different sources within the area, to source out the best farms for the best quality and best price possible. We show you as well that the ability for these hypermarts to source these products from companies as farms is the reason why that perhaps you can get your chicken for RM1, according to our Prime Minister. But this debate is not about the removal of agents or middlemen. We told you already that this debate should have been about how companies should be allowed to, for example, skew labor laws, to impose long working hours on their employees for profit. We tell you that the government bench has skewed away from their true burden and has scoped today's debate down to only a sole form of regulation, and that is the middleman, which is already existent within status quo. That's why they're not going through. But let's look at this further. No, thank you. We think that the removal of middlemen and even the provision of subsidies from the state are all extensions of how the state comes in to regulate, to offer the best price possible for the consumers. Why is this so? Because we tell you, in the light of competition, in the nature of the hypermarkets, that environment, that they are not able to self-regulate amongst each other. The fact that you are competing against Giant or you are competing against Tesco already tells you that you are not able to have this form of collaboration, so to say, to suddenly hike up the price. But even that was the case, we tell you that state authorities or even the FDA, which is the Food and Drug Agency, are able to come to intervene in this situation to ensure that that form of price ceiling is kept at bay. Let's look at this further, because Atira told you explicitly about this middleman conspiracy. Let's finally debunk this. We tell you, they say that middlemen collaborate to control the supply to hypermarkets. We tell you at most that this only exists under the paradigm of perhaps sundry shops and smaller shops within the city itself. We think that this price effect or this price hike does not exist for hypermarkets who have that form of capability to source out their own resources. No, thank you. We think there is no incentive either for hypermarkets to then choose the more expensive option in their supply, because the supply price will directly reflect into their product pricing and their sales. And that's the reason why that they have no incentive at the get-go to even source out these middlemen, unless these middlemen have some form of loyalty towards them and they have that form of they have a deal in terms of transportation fee, and we think even if that was a context, that the price hike wouldn't be that great anyway. But yes, sir, before that.
Okay, outside what the best interest of the consumer and the hypermarket? What is your side fighting?
Our side is fighting for consumer rights as well. You need to tell me why, in today's debate, that you need this form of company regulation to remove the middleman. And if that really was, if they really were that harmful, we're telling you that the companies do not have that capability to remove them altogether. Either they take them because they're cheap and they're trustable, or the state comes in to intervene. Simple as that. But even in the worst case scenario where the middleman suddenly monopolize the market and this laundry list of harms that Atira talked about, price fixing and conspiracy theories, we tell you that state intervention is still a more legitimate form because they have the authority, because they are the regulatory boards within the country. Second issue, are companies capable of self-regulation? We don't think this idea of the invisible hand is going to work, right? Because all this analysis provided by both my substantive speakers were never dealt with. The nature of the free market, how it's a competitive environment, and that the lack of state regulation would allow the leeway for companies to violate labor laws, and that's what the debate's supposed to be about. Minimum wages, the overworking of employees. Why? Because companies are profit-driven in nature. That means maximum output with minimum expense. Second idea that we told you that was never engaged upon, this idea of collaboration and monopolization. That now businesses from the same sector are allowed to join forces to control price brackets. We think there's several harms to this. How it harms the purchasing power of consumers, how it harms innovation and infant industries that are trying to enter the market and compete with bigger branches such as Tesco or Giant per se. We think that their proposal will only lead to a further monopolization when they don't acknowledge the state as a sole protector and a sole bastion against these form of price hikes and regulation. Last issue, final for today, what's best for consumers. We think in the light where hypermarkets are, be it hypermarkets or the middlemen, whichever, whoever's trying to monopolize, whoever's trying to control the price hike, we think it's still better when you acknowledge the state's authority in being able to maximize the value of the dollar for the consumer. It's reasons like this that we have price control, reasons for like this that we have anti-competition laws such as Sherman Antitrust Act in 1968. We think hypermarkets are also able to investigate different sources from around the area to compare prices, calculate distance to maximize the profit margins for the consumer and for themselves. For all those reasons, Mr. Speaker, we take this debate.
Thank the opportunity for speech. I'd like to invite the live speaker.
Mr. Speaker, this has been a very weird debate. Firstly, government narrowed the debate to only hypermarkets. Then they also narrowed the definition of regulate to be self-regulation within companies and not dealing with the real issue of government intervention in businesses. In other words, they are a chicken like hypermarket in this debate. But essentially, they are more chicken or so because there's no proposal coming out from them. Because if you concede that the government needs to have the force of law to regulate price ceilings and a minimum wage, why are you now chickening out from proposing that we should intervene and remove out the middleman through regulation and businesses? They only hope that businesses should do so. We think that is principally inconsistent. We think we don't know necessarily what needs to counter in today's debate. But if you agree principally that businesses need to self-regulate, then necessarily it doesn't matter whether they employ a lot of middlemen or whether they employ no middlemen at all, because there's a principle of self-regulation that you need to protect and you need to defend today. But we engage with them at the most extreme level, on the middleman, even though it might seem very hard to do so. But we think that middlemen are not making prices more expensive, because hypermarkets have internal checks and balances. They will always source for the cheapest middleman that offer the cheapest prices. On the idea of businessmen colluding to fix a price, we think that is where regulation comes in. The Competition Act comes in to penalize middlemen or companies that collude to provide a fixed price, where they are able to investigate price trends and hikes to see whether there is a form of collusion. But there are also many scenarios where we are told today that hypermarkets sometimes choose the middleman option because it's the most financially sound one. Because in any case, they will do it because they will need to compete with other businesses like Tesco and Justco. They need to lower the price as much as possible so that they're able to compete. So there's a natural incentive for them to choose the lowest price middleman, or even so, maybe the middleman option is the cheaper one because they provide logistics, they provide connections, they provide better transportation of goods here. Maybe it's not financially feasible for Giant to go directly into the roots of Perlis or Pahang to find for all those products. We receive no response whatsoever from our analysis and our rebuttal on their argument on the middleman. They are only fixing on the same argument that they are expensive, and they're expensive. Let's look at what they didn't engage on what the real debate should be about. We talk about how businesses are profit-oriented, that they will go to most extreme measures that often bring negative externalities like environmental degradation or imposing no minimum wage to people. And that's where it's harming the public. When it harms the development and growth of the economy, the state can come in and say that we will enforce environmental laws, that we will enforce minimum wage, that businesses cannot self-regulate themselves, that the invisible hand theory is a myth in this complex business world that we live today. But we also talk about the more important thing, which is competition, that businesses at times collude, and that's exactly the kind of acts that we abhor and we want to prevent in today's debate. That's where the Competition Act comes into play today. That is where business needs to be regulated. We provided you extensive analysis. We do not think that you should accept their very narrow and unfair characterization in today's debate. But in any case, we have been the gentlemen in today's debate to engage with them. They have never once talked and engaged on our points in today's debate. For all those reasons, Mr. Speaker, we think that we should take this debate.
Mr. Speaker, this debate is about whether or not middlemen are needed, which we tell you no, and who should be the one that removes these middlemen in the first place. Because side government told you that it should be the businesses itself, and yes, side opposition should be telling you that it's government. However, if you look at their case, only one point is supporting that burden, which was Deborah's last point when she wanted to talk to you about the neutrality and accountability of side government. Nothing in Wajet's speech supported that one. Only he wanted to talk to you about environment. Mr. Speaker, this is how I'm going to do my reply speech. First of all, I'm going to talk to you about the non-issues in this debate, things that all of you should put aside and focus on what the real issues are. Because second of all, I'm going to talk to you about the issues. 3 of them. Who should regulate? Second of all, which benefits the hypermarkets? And third of all, which benefits the consumers? Lastly, I'm going to tell you why we should take this debate and why we should be the ones going to the finals and not that. Let's look at the non-issues, right? First of all, when they wanted to talk to you about banks and exploitation, we tell you that's not the issue because they are not a party to this motion. Second of all, when they wanted to talk to you about safety of products, we tell you that this is also not the debate because that's on the manufacturer side. That's a different debate. And there's already legal check and balances that control the safety and quality of products. Third, non-issue, the environment. Seriously, Weja, I already know. I took environmental law. I already know that there's an Environmental Quality Act that happens. And under that act, we tell you that there's already a legal punishment that if these companies go against them, they will be punished by state. So what more do you want to push for? Fourth of all, monopoly. We tell you that even if even if there are middlemen, we tell you that monopoly still already happens because these hypermarkets already control the market itself and stop small businesses from going bigger. Okay, those are the non-issues. Let's look at the real issues, right, in this debate. Who should regulate? Because side opposition claimed it to be the government just because there's neutrality and just because there's accountability. We tell you that there is also accountability and neutrality on our side. Why? Because these businesses want to gain profit. They have a business to take care of. We tell you that they will always be accountable to the consumers. So we don't see how that is not how is that mutually exclusive on your side. Let's look at our reason, right? We told you that these hypermarkets have the right to self-regulate because they are private businesses and the only laws that they should conform to are the limitation of prices that government has set. Whatever happens in between should just be our own private businesses, and this is why we should be the ones removing these middlemen. Second issue, right? Which benefits the hypermarkets? Because side opposition told you that their proposal now prevents them from failing, as if these hypermarkets don't know what they're doing. Because we tell you that they will ever let their business fail. It's not as if they don't know what they're doing. Second of all, they talked about how competition is going to be harmed on their side. I've already told you the competition is already harmed on our side. Competition is better dealt with on our side because it's more beneficial. Let's look at the second issue, which benefits a third issue, which benefits the consumers. Which benefits hypermarkets on our side? The benefits are, first of all, it removes the harm of middlemen, because once you remove middlemen, all those harms that I talked to you about will be gone. Second of all, we tell you that hypermarkets will gain more profit. Let's look at the third issue, right? Which benefits consumers more? Never did I hear anything from side opposition. Whereas we have told you that because by removing middlemen who causes the price hike among products, because they are the ones supplying, they are the one who are controlling the prices, we tell you that now consumers will get lower prices. This comes under our side. Now let's tell you why we win this debate. First of all, contradiction on their side, because Deborah wanted to talk to you about why we need to remove these middlemen in this situation. Then suddenly Wayjet stands up and talks to you about why somehow these middlemen are needed because somehow they provide lower costs and now because they are more feasible. We tell you that no. We tell you that these middlemen are exploiting these hypermarkets and that's the reason why they should go. Second of all, they did not fulfill their burden. The majority of the points never supported their so-called burden. Third of all, we tell you that there's no engagement response on their side, and this is why we take the debate.